The blue glow from Vivian's laptop screen cut through our bedroom darkness like a knife through butter. 3:15 a.m., and my wife was hunched over her computer with the intensity of a surgeon performing heart surgery. I'd been lying there for 20 minutes, watching her fingers dance across the keyboard, listening to the soft clicks that had pulled me from sleep. "Can't rest?" I whispered, propping myself up on one elbow. She jumped slightly, then glanced over her shoulder. "Just catching up on some project files. Go back to sleep, Ethan." Vivian Rowe had always been driven. Creative director at Sterling Design, she lived and breathed her work. But midnight laptop sessions were new territory, even for her. I watched her scroll through what looked like old folders, files with dates going back years. That's when I saw it. The notification popped up in the corner of her screen, a text message preview that made my stomach drop 3 floors down an elevator shaft. "Let's meet about the old project. Just us, like old times. Derek Fallon." The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I hadn't heard that name in 5 years, not since Vivian had told me about her past, how she'd left her first husband for Derek, how that relationship had crashed and burned, how she'd sworn off men like him forever. "Who's texting you this late?" I kept my voice casual, but my mind was racing. "Just work stuff." She closed the laptop with a snap. "Really, Ethan, it's nothing important." Nothing important. Right. Because project managers typically send romantic messages at 3 in the morning about old times. I'd built my IT consulting business on reading between the lines of what clients didn't say, and Vivian's body language was screaming volumes. She slipped back under the covers, but I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat from a furnace. Her breathing took 20 minutes to settle into sleep patterns, and even then, she tossed and turned like she was fighting demons in her dreams. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind churning through possibilities I didn't want to consider. Vivian had cheated before, not on me, but on her ex-husband, with Derek. She'd been honest about it during our early dating days, framed it as a mistake she'd learned from, a chapter she'd closed forever. Apparently, some chapters have sequels. The next morning, Vivian was already gone when I stumbled to the kitchen, a note on the counter. "Early meeting. Coffee's fresh. Love you." The handwriting looked hurried, guilty almost, if handwriting could carry guilt. I poured coffee and fired up my laptop. Time for some digital archaeology. Derek Fallon hadn't been hard to track down 5 years ago when I'd first heard his name, and he wasn't hard to find now. LinkedIn showed he'd moved back to town 6 months ago, taking a project manager position at TechFlow Solutions. His profile picture showed the same cocky smile I remembered from Vivian's old photos, the ones she'd thought she'd deleted from her cloud storage. My phone buzzed. Ben Murphy, my oldest friend and the only person who knew the full story of Vivian's past. "Coffee at Murphy's in an hour?" his text read. "Make it 30 minutes, I replied. Murphy's pub wasn't technically open for breakfast, but Ben owned the place and lived in the apartment upstairs. He met me at the side door, already dressed despite the early hour. Ex-cops never really shake the habit of being ready for anything. "You look like someone stole your favorite wrench," Ben said, leading me to a corner booth. "What's eating you?" Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I told him about the midnight laptop session, the text from Derek, Vivian's evasive behavior. Ben listened without interrupting, his cop instincts still sharp after 3 years behind the bar. "Could be innocent," he said when I finished. "Could be she's just helping with some old project." At 3 a.m.? With romantic undertones? Ben rubbed his jaw. "Derek's been coming in here. Couple times a week since he moved back. Talks too much when he drinks, which is often." "What kind of talking?" "The kind where he mentions your wife's name more than a married woman's name should be mentioned by another man." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "Specifics." Last week he was going on about unfinished business and second chances, kept checking his phone like he was waiting for something important. Ben leaned forward. Ethan, I've seen this movie before. It doesn't end well for the husband. I spent the rest of the morning in my home office, supposedly working on client projects, but actually diving deeper into Derek's digital footprint. Social media, public records, employment history. I mapped out his entire life like a detective building a case. What I found made my suspicions concrete. Derek had specifically requested the transfer back to our town. His LinkedIn showed he'd been in contact with several people from Sterling Design, including Vivian, for months before his official move. The old project they were discussing wasn't some random work assignment. It was a campaign they'd collaborated on during their affair, back when Vivian was married to someone else. History wasn't just repeating itself. It was playing an encore performance. That evening, Vivian came home 3 hours later than usual, claiming client meetings had run long. She seemed nervous, distracted, checking her phone every few minutes like she was expecting important news. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me. "Productive. Wrapped up the Henderson project, started on the university's network upgrade." I kept my tone neutral. "How about you? Any interesting meetings?" "Just the usual. Strategy sessions, budget reviews." She paused, then added casually, "Oh, and Derek Fallon stopped by. Remember him? He's working with TechFlow now, wants to discuss some collaborative opportunities." There it was, the opening move in what I was beginning to recognize as a carefully orchestrated game. She was testing the waters, seeing how I'd react to Derek's name being thrown into casual conversation. "Derek Fallon," I repeated slowly. "Wasn't he the guy you used to work with? Before we met?" "Among others, yes. He's got some interesting ideas for cross-company projects." "I'm sure he does." That night, I waited until Vivian was asleep before slipping down to my office. If she wanted to play games with old projects and secret communications, then it was time to level the playing field. I'd built my reputation on being 3 steps ahead of technology problems. Time to apply those same skills to a more personal challenge. The beauty of being an IT consultant is that people underestimate what you can do with the right access and a suspicious mind. Vivian had forgotten that I'd set up all our home networking, including the router that logged every device connection and the backup system that mirrored her phone to our shared cloud storage. She'd also forgotten that I knew her passwords, all of them. By Thursday morning, I had a complete picture of her digital affair. Text messages, email exchanges, even shared document edits on projects that had nothing to do with current work. Derek wasn't just back in town, he was back in Vivian's life in every way except physical. The messages painted a clear timeline. It started 6 months ago with a LinkedIn connection request. Professional at first, then nostalgic, then intimate. By last month, they were exchanging messages that belonged in a romance novel, not a business relationship. "I never stopped thinking about what we had," Derek had written. "Some connections are too strong to break," Vivian had replied. My personal favorite was Derek's message from Tuesday. "Your husband seems like a nice guy, but he doesn't understand your creative fire like I do." Nice guy. Right. We'd see how nice I could be. I spent the morning crafting my response strategy. Direct confrontation would just drive them underground, make them more careful. Instead, I decided to play a longer game, one that would expose their affair while simultaneously destroying Derek's credibility and Vivian's professional reputation. The first move was subtle. Derek's company, TechFlow Solutions, had been trying to land a contract with the university for months. I happened to know the IT director there, Professor Morrow, who'd been my thesis advisor back in graduate school. A casual conversation about security concerns with outside contractors was all it took to plant seeds of doubt about TechFlow's reliability. Move 2 was more direct. Derek had been bragging about his gym routine on social media, posting workout selfies like some college kid trying to impress sorority girls. I arranged to join the same gym, timing my visits to coincide with his. Not to confront him, just to observe, to let him know I was around, to make him nervous. The psychological pressure worked better than I'd hoped. By Friday, Derek was checking over his shoulder constantly, cutting his workouts short when he spotted me. Guilty consciences make people paranoid, and paranoid people make mistakes. The mistake came sooner than expected. Friday evening, Vivian announced she had to work late on a critical project presentation. The same presentation she'd been secretly collaborating on with Derek for 2 weeks, according to their message history. Need any help? I offered. I could review the technical specs. No, that's okay. It's mostly creative strategy stuff. You'd be bored. I'm sure I would be. After she left, I activated the tracking app I'd discreetly installed on her phone. Not illegal when it's a shared family plan and you're trying to protect your marriage from a known cheater. The app showed her location as the Sterling Design office for exactly 30 minutes before moving to Derek's apartment complex across town. Time for move 3. I drove to Derek's building and parked where I had a clear view of the entrance. Sure enough, Vivian's car was in the visitor parking, tucked behind a maintenance dumpster like she was trying to hide it. Instead of storming upstairs like the wronged husband in some bad movie, I took photos. Time stamps, license plates, clear shots of both vehicles. Then I settled in to wait. They emerged 2 hours later, Derek walking Vivian to her car with the swagger of a man who thought he was getting away with something. He kissed her cheek, a lingering, intimate gesture that confirmed everything I needed to know. I waited until Vivian's car disappeared before approaching Derek's building. The security door had a simple electronic lock, the kind I'd installed dozens of times for clients. 30 seconds with the right tools, and I was inside. Derek's apartment was on the 3rd floor. I didn't break in. That would have been illegal and stupid. Instead, I did something much more effective. I left a small gift outside his door, a printed copy of his LinkedIn profile with a handwritten note. Impressive resume. Your new neighbors are lucky to have such an accomplished project manager. A friend. The message was clear without being threatening. I know who you are, where you live, and what you're doing. The paranoia would eat at him like acid. Saturday morning brought the first crack in their facade. Vivian was jumpy, checking her phone constantly, starting conversations, then trailing off mid-sentence. When Derek called during breakfast, she stepped outside to take it. The first time in our marriage she'd hidden a phone conversation from me. Everything all right? I asked when she returned. Fine, just work stress. Anything I can help with? No, it's complicated. Professional politics. Professional politics. That was one way to describe adultery. The weekend gave me time to prepare phase 2 of my strategy. If Vivian and Derek wanted to play with old projects, then I'd give them a project they'd never forget. I spent Sunday creating a digital trap that would make their collaboration impossible to hide. Using my access to Vivian's work accounts, I planted subtle inconsistencies in the presentation they were preparing, small errors that would only be visible to someone with Derek's specific technical background. When Derek inevitably discovered these errors and suggested fixes, it would create a digital trail proving their unauthorized collaboration. Sterling Design had strict policies about sharing proprietary information with competitors. Vivian's career wouldn't survive the scandal, but that was just the opening gambit. The real game was about to begin. Monday morning, I called Professor Morrow and arranged a lunch meeting. Time to bring in the heavy artillery. Ethan, good to see you, Morrow said, settling into the corner booth at Murphy's Pub. Ben tells me you've been having some personal difficulties. I'd forgotten how much I missed Morrow's directness. 73 years old, emeritus professor of computer science, and still sharp enough to cut glass. He'd been like a father to me during graduate school, and Ben had apparently filled him in on my situation. I need advice about handling a delicate situation, I said, hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically, of course. Morrow's eyes twinkled with understanding. What kind of situation? I outlined the affair, the professional complications, and my plans for exposing both Derek and Vivian. Morrow listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "Your strategy is sound," he said when I finished. "But you're thinking too small." "How so?" "You're focused on exposing their affair and damaging their careers. But what you really want is justice, and justice requires that the punishment fit the crime." Morrow leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Derek Fallon isn't just cheating with your wife. He's using that relationship to steal proprietary information from Sterling Design. Industrial espionage is a federal crime, Ethan. Much more serious than simple adultery." The implications hit me like lightning. If I could prove Derek was using his relationship with Vivian to gain access to Sterling's client information and project strategies, then I wouldn't just be exposing an affair, I'd be uncovering corporate espionage. "How would I prove something like that?" I asked. "Leave that to me. I still have contacts in federal law enforcement, and TechFlow's sudden interest in Sterling's clients has already raised some eyebrows." As we shook hands outside the pub, Morrow gave me a piece of advice that would prove prophetic. "Remember, Ethan, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's winning so completely that your enemies can't recover." Phase 2 was about to become much more interesting. Tuesday morning brought the first sign that my strategy was working. Derek called in sick to work, something he'd never done in 6 months, according to his social media pattern of daily check-ins and workout posts. The note I'd left at his apartment had rattled him more than expected. Vivian was showing stress fractures, too. She'd forgotten to set her morning alarm, spilled coffee on her favorite blouse, and snapped at me for leaving dishes in the sink, something that had never bothered her before. "Rough night?" I asked, handing her a paper towel for the coffee stain. "Just tired. This project is more complicated than I thought." "Maybe you should ask for help. Fresh perspective might solve whatever problems you're having." She gave me a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing specific. Just that collaboration usually works better than trying to handle everything alone." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I spent Tuesday morning implementing the next phase of my plan. Professor Morrow had introduced me to Agent Patricia Wells, a federal investigator specializing in corporate espionage cases. Our conversation had been enlightening and terrifying in equal measure. "Industrial espionage is more common than people realize," Wells had explained, "especially in tech-heavy regions like this. Companies pay good money for insider information about competitors' strategies and client lists." How would someone prove that kind of information sharing was happening? Digital forensics, email patterns, document access logs, financial records showing unexplained payments. The evidence usually tells a clear story once you know what to look for. Wells couldn't officially investigate without concrete evidence of federal crimes, but she'd given me guidance on what kind of documentation would trigger an investigation. My job was to create a paper trail that would be impossible to ignore. Wednesday brought the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Vivian announced she had another late meeting, this one supposedly with potential new clients, that required creative brainstorming in a relaxed environment. "Where are you meeting them?" I asked. "That new wine bar downtown. Neutral territory, you know. Less formal than the office." The wine bar she mentioned was 3 blocks from Derek's apartment. Coincidence seemed unlikely. This time, I didn't just follow and observe. This time, I brought backup. Ben Murphy had been skeptical about getting involved until I showed him the evidence I'd compiled. Screenshots of messages, location data, financial records showing Derek's suspicious spending patterns. The ex-cop in him couldn't ignore what was obviously a systematic deception. "This is some elaborate planning," Ben said, scrolling through Derek's credit card records. "Guy's been setting this up for months. Apartment lease signed before he even got the job offer. Gym membership at the same place your wife works out. Even joined the same professional organizations. Premeditated adultery. Premeditated something. Question is, what's his endgame? Just stealing your wife or something bigger? The answer came sooner than expected. We positioned ourselves at Murphy's pub, which had a clear view of the wine bar's entrance. Sure enough, Vivian arrived at 7:30, followed 10 minutes later by Derek. No mysterious clients, no business meeting, just two people who thought they were smarter than everyone around them. "How long you want to wait?" Ben asked. "Long enough to document everything. Then we make our move." At 9:15, they emerged from the wine bar, Derek's hand possessively placed on Vivian's lower back. They walked toward his apartment building, completely absorbed in each other, oblivious to their surroundings. That's when Ben and I stepped out of the shadows. "Evening, folks," Ben called out, his voice carrying the authority he'd developed during 20 years in law enforcement. "Beautiful night for a walk." Vivian froze like a deer in headlights. Derek tried to play it cool, but I could see panic flickering behind his eyes. "Ethan," Vivian said, her voice artificially bright. "What are you doing here?" "Having a drink with Ben. Imagine running into you two." I looked directly at Derek. "Derek Fallon, right? I don't think we've been properly introduced. Ethan Rowe, Vivian's husband." Derek extended his hand with practiced confidence. "Derek, nice to meet you officially. Vivian's told me so much about you." "Funny, she's barely mentioned you at all." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Vivian jumped in with nervous energy. "Derek was just explaining some project management techniques. We were discussing potential collaboration between our companies." "At a wine bar, at 9 o'clock at night. How dedicated of you both." Ben stepped forward, his presence adding weight to the moment. "Derek, isn't it? You've been coming into my pub, Murphy's, couple blocks over, always talking about work, as I recall." "I might have stopped in a few times. More than a few, and you talk about work quite a bit, specifically about landing new clients and insider information." Ben's cop instincts were showing. Interesting conversation topics for casual bar talk. Derek's confidence cracked visibly. "I don't know what you're implying." "Not implying anything, just making observations." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Derek's car parked outside Sterling Design at midnight the previous week. "Like observing that you seem to spend a lot of time at my wife's office during off hours." Vivian's face went pale. She hadn't known I was tracking their meetings that closely. "This is ridiculous," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We're colleagues discussing business." "Colleagues from different companies," Ben pointed out. "Companies that compete for the same contracts." "Are you accusing me of something?" "Just wondering why a project manager needs so much access to a competitor's creative director," I said, "especially when that access seems to coincide with your company bidding on the same projects." The accusation hit home. Derek's face flushed, and he took a step toward me, a mistake that Ben immediately countered by moving between us. "Easy there, project manager. No need to get physical over a simple conversation." "We should go," Vivian said quickly. "This is getting out of hand." "Good idea," I agreed. "Vivian, I'll see you at home. We have a lot to discuss." "And Derek," Ben added, "maybe find a different bar for your after-work drinks. Mine's getting a bit crowded with corporate espionage talk." As they hurried away in opposite directions, Ben clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, that was fun. Think it worked?" Like a charm, Derek's going to panic, make mistakes, and Vivian knows I'm on to them. What's next? Now we let them destroy themselves. Paranoia is a powerful weapon when wielded correctly. Thursday morning confirmed my prediction. Vivian was a nervous wreck, jumping every time her phone buzzed, avoiding eye contact during breakfast, making excuses to leave early for work. "Everything all right?" I asked as she gathered her things. "Fine. Just busy day ahead. No late meetings tonight, I hope." She paused at the door. "Ethan, about last night." "What about it?" "It wasn't what it looked like." "What did it look like?" "I don't know, but whatever you're thinking, you're wrong." "I'm thinking my wife was having drinks with another man and lying to me about it. Am I wrong about that?" She couldn't answer, which was answer enough. After she left, I called Professor Morrow with an update. The conversation was brief but productive. "Agent Wells is very interested in your documentation," he said, "especially the financial records showing Derek's spending patterns and the timeline of his company's bidding activity." "Is there enough for an investigation?" "Getting close. We need one more piece, direct evidence of information transfer. Something that proves Derek gained access to Sterling's proprietary data through his relationship with your wife." "I might be able to arrange that." "Be careful, Ethan. We're moving into serious territory now." Serious territory indeed. But after 3 days of watching my marriage dissolve while Derek and Vivian played games with my life, I was ready for serious consequences. Time to give them exactly what they deserved. Friday brought the break I'd been waiting for. Vivian left her laptop open during her morning shower, the first operational security mistake she'd made since this whole mess started. 20 minutes was enough time to plant a keylogger program that would record every keystroke, every password, every document she accessed. The software was commercially available, designed for parents monitoring children's internet activity, completely legal when installed on your own household computers. The fact that it would also capture evidence of corporate espionage was just a convenient side effect. By noon, I had access to everything. Vivian's email accounts, cloud storage, shared documents with Derek, even their private messaging through an encrypted app they thought was secure. The digital trail painted a picture that would make Agent Wells very happy. Derek wasn't just stealing my wife. He was using their relationship to systematically steal Sterling Design's client information, project strategies, and bidding data. TechFlow's recent success in landing contracts wasn't due to superior service. It was industrial espionage, plain and simple. I spent Friday afternoon documenting everything, creating a timeline that would be impossible to dispute. Screenshots, financial records, communication logs, enough evidence to bury both of them professionally and legally. But I wasn't ready to pull that trigger yet. First, I wanted them to suffer the way I'd been suffering. I wanted them to feel paranoid, desperate, trapped by their own guilt and stupidity. The opportunity came Saturday morning. Vivian announced she was going shopping with her sister, a lie I could easily verify since her sister lived in California and they hadn't spoken in months. The keylogger showed she'd arranged to meet Derek at his apartment for what they called a strategy session about handling the situation. Perfect. Time for a different kind of strategy session. I waited 30 minutes after Vivian left, then drove to Derek's apartment complex. His building had a maintenance entrance that was usually propped open on weekends, a security flaw I'd noticed during my previous surveillance. Getting inside was simple. Derek's apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the hallway was empty. Instead of trying to get inside, I did something much more effective. I placed a small wireless camera in the hallway, positioned to record everyone entering and leaving Derek's unit. The camera was motion-activated and would upload footage directly to a cloud server. Completely legal when placed in a public hallway, and devastating evidence of their ongoing affair. Then I went home and waited. The footage started recording at 2:15 p.m. when Vivian arrived at Derek's door. She looked nervous, checking the hallway before knocking. Derek answered immediately, pulling her inside with obvious urgency. They stayed inside for 3 hours. When Vivian emerged at 5:30, she looked disheveled and stressed. The camera captured her checking her appearance in the hallway mirror, smoothing her hair, adjusting her clothes, the actions of a woman trying to hide evidence of an affair. But the real prize came 10 minutes later when Derek stepped into the hallway to throw away a bag of trash. The motion sensor captured him clearly, and more importantly, it captured the contents of the bag when it split open. Printouts of Sterling Design documents, project folders, client lists, physical evidence of corporate espionage, recorded in high definition. Saturday evening, Vivian came home with shopping bags full of clothes she clearly hadn't bought. The tags were wrong, the sizes didn't match her preferences, and the receipt timestamps showed purchases made while she was at Derek's apartment. "Find anything good?" I asked, examining a blouse that was 2 sizes too large. Just some basics. Nothing exciting. This one's interesting. I held up the oversized blouse. Very different from your usual style. I thought I'd try something new. Change can be good. Speaking of which, I had an interesting conversation with Professor Morrow today. Vivian's face went rigid. Oh? He mentioned that TechFlow Solutions has been remarkably successful lately, landing contracts that seemed out of their league, beating more established companies with surprisingly detailed proposals. That's nice for them. Morrow seemed to think their success was almost too good to be true, like they had insider information about their competitors' strategies. The color drained from Vivian's face. Why would he think that? Just speculation. But he mentioned that federal investigators sometimes look into patterns like that. Corporate espionage is a serious crime, apparently. Vivian's hands were shaking as she folded the clothes she hadn't actually bought. That seems like a stretch. Probably, but Morrow has connections in law enforcement. If he's noticed the pattern, others probably have too. That night, Vivian barely slept. I could feel her tossing and turning, getting up to check her phone, pacing the hallway. Guilty consciences are torture devices that never need batteries. Sunday morning brought a frantic phone call that she took in the garage, thinking I couldn't hear her through the walls. She was wrong. "Derek, we need to be more careful," she whispered urgently. "Ethan knows something, and there might be federal investigators looking into TechFlow's contracts." I couldn't hear Derek's response, but Vivian's replies painted a clear picture. "No, we can't meet at your place anymore. It's too risky." I don't know how he found out. Maybe someone saw us. We need to destroy any physical evidence, documents, printouts, anything that connects us. I'm scared, Derek. This could ruin everything. Too late for that, I thought. Everything was already ruined. Now it was just a matter of how much damage they'd suffer in the collapse. Sunday afternoon, I called Agent Wells and Professor Morrow for a conference call. "The evidence is compelling," Wells said after reviewing my documentation. "Financial records, communication logs, video footage of document disposal. This is exactly the kind of systematic information theft we investigate." "What happens next?" I asked. "We open an official investigation. Search warrants for both their homes and offices, forensic analysis of their computers and phones, interviews with colleagues and clients." "How long before arrests?" "Assuming the evidence holds up under scrutiny, probably 2 weeks. Maybe less if they panic and make more mistakes." Professor Morrow chimed in. "Ethan, you should prepare for this to get messy. Corporate espionage cases generate a lot of publicity, especially in a town this size." "I'm ready for messy. I'm tired of being the only one suffering while they play games with my life." "Fair enough. But remember, once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. Derek and Vivian will face federal charges, prison time, complete destruction of their careers and reputations." "Good," I said, and meant it. Monday morning, Vivian announced she was taking a few personal days from work to handle some family business. The keylogger showed she'd spent Sunday night deleting files, clearing browser histories, and coordinating with Derek to destroy evidence. They were in full panic mode, which meant they were about to make the kind of desperate mistakes that would seal their fate. I was looking forward to watching them dig their own graves. Tuesday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Vivian had barely slept, spending most of the night pacing between our bedroom and her home office, deleting files and making hushed phone calls she thought I couldn't hear. The keylogger captured every desperate keystroke as she tried to erase evidence that was already safely backed up on federal servers. At breakfast, she could barely hold her coffee cup steady. "I think we should talk," she said, not meeting my eyes. "About what?" "About us, about our marriage, about where we're heading." I set down my newspaper and gave her my full attention. "I'm listening." "Things have been tense lately. We're both stressed, working too much, not communicating well. Her voice had the rehearsed quality of someone who'd practiced this speech. Maybe we should consider counseling or a trial separation, just to get some perspective. Perspective on what, exactly? On whether we're still right for each other, whether we want the same things. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to frame the collapse of our marriage as mutual incompatibility rather than her systematic betrayal. Classic cheater behavior. Rewrite history to minimize guilt. What kinds of things do you want that I don't? I asked. I don't know. Different things. Career growth, creative challenges, intellectual stimulation. And you think Derek Fallon provides those things? The coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering against the kitchen floor. Coffee and ceramic fragments spread across the tiles like the pieces of our marriage. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Derek provides intellectual stimulation, creative challenges, and career growth, plus insider information about competitor strategies, client lists, and bidding data. Vivian's face went white as paper. Ethan, I can explain. No need. I understand perfectly. You're having an affair with Derek, sharing proprietary information from Sterling Design, and helping him steal contracts through corporate espionage. Did I miss anything important? She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again, like a fish, gasping for air. No words came out. The federal investigation starts today, I continued conversationally. Agent Wells has enough evidence to prosecute both of you for industrial espionage, conspiracy, and fraud. Prison sentences typically run 5 to 10 years for crimes like this. Federal investigation? The words came out as a whisper. Corporate espionage is a federal crime, Vivian. Stealing trade secrets, sharing proprietary information with competitors, using personal relationships to gain unauthorized access to confidential data. All federal crimes with serious consequences. She collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. How did you find out? I'm an IT consultant. Digital forensics is part of my job. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my wife started collaborating with a known cheater on projects that violated every professional ethics standard? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You'd steal enough information to make Derek successful, then leave me for him? Live happily ever after on the profits from corporate espionage? We didn't plan it. It just developed. Nothing just develops, Vivian. You made choices. Deliberate, calculated choices to betray your marriage, your company, and your professional integrity. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Wells. Search warrants approved. Executing at 2 p.m. today. Speaking of choices, I said, showing Vivian the message, you have about 4 hours to decide how you want to handle this. Cooperate with federal investigators and maybe get a reduced sentence, or fight the charges and face the full consequences. What do you want from me? Nothing. It's too late for apologies or explanations or marriage counseling. You made your choice when you decided Derek was worth more than our marriage. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Systematically, deliberately, for months. And you would have kept hurting me if you hadn't gotten caught. Vivian started crying, not the gentle tears of remorse, but the harsh sobs of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. What happens now? Now you call a lawyer, a good one, because you're going to need expert legal representation for federal charges. And us? There is no us. There hasn't been an US since you decided Derek was more important than your marriage vows. I left her crying at the kitchen table and drove to Murphy's Pub, where Ben was waiting with coffee and moral support. How'd she take it? Ben asked. About as well as expected. Denial, then panic, then trying to blame circumstances instead of choices. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. About the marriage ending? Yes. About exposing their crimes? Not even slightly. At exactly 2 p.m., my phone rang. Vivian, sobbing hysterically. "They're here," she managed between sobs. "Federal agents. Search warrants. They're taking everything. Computers, phones, files, documents." "I know. Derek's been arrested. They handcuffed him at his office in front of everyone." "Good. How can you be so calm? This is destroying everything." "You destroyed everything, Vivian. This is just the consequences catching up. I need you to come home, please. I can't handle this alone." "You're not my problem anymore. Call your lawyer." I hung up and ordered another coffee. The local news picked up the story by evening. "Federal investigation targets local tech companies" was the headline, accompanied by footage of Derek being led from TechFlow's offices in handcuffs. The reporter mentioned allegations of corporate espionage and conspiracy involving stolen trade secrets. Derek's mugshot appeared on screen. Gone was the cocky confidence, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of a man whose life had just imploded. The news mentioned he was being held without bail pending a federal hearing. Vivian wasn't arrested yet. Agent Wells had explained that her cooperation would determine whether she faced charges as a co-conspirator or as a witness who'd been manipulated. Either way, her career at Sterling Design was over. The company had already issued a statement about zero tolerance for violations of client confidentiality and professional ethics. Wednesday morning brought a knock at my door. Vivian stood on the porch with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes. "I'm staying at my mother's for a while," she said. "The lawyers think it's better if we're not living together during the investigation." Probably wise. "Ethan, I know you hate me right now." "I don't hate you, Vivian. Hate requires passion, and I don't feel passionate about you anymore. I feel disappointed. Can we ever get past this? Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. This is one of them." She nodded, tears starting again. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For Derek. For the lies. For destroying our marriage. I believe you're sorry. But sorry doesn't undo the choices you made. What if I testify against Derek? What if I cooperate fully with the investigation? Then maybe you'll avoid prison. But it won't save our marriage." "Why not?" "Because trust, once broken completely, can't be repaired. And you didn't just break my trust, you shattered it, ground the pieces into dust, and then tried to convince me the destruction was my fault." Vivian picked up her suitcases and walked toward her car. At the driver's door, she turned back. "I did love you, Ethan. I still do." "No, you don't. You love the security I provided, the stability, the comfortable life. But you don't love me. If you did, Derek never would have been an option." She drove away without another word. That afternoon, Professor Morrow stopped by with updates on the federal investigation. "Derek's looking at serious time," he said, settling into my living room chair. "The evidence is overwhelming, and TechFlow is cooperating fully to minimize their corporate liability. They're claiming Derek went rogue, acted without authorization. What about Vivian? Depends on her cooperation level. If she testifies against Derek and provides complete documentation of their activities, she might avoid prison. But her career is finished either way." "Good. Agent Wells wanted me to tell you that your documentation was crucial. Without the digital forensics work you did, they never could have built such a solid case." "I had good motivation." "Indeed. How are you holding up?" "Better than expected. Angry, disappointed, but also relieved. Living with lies and deception was exhausting. At least now, everything's in the open." "What's next for you?" "Divorce proceedings, rebuilding my life, maybe expanding my consulting business. Turns out I have a talent for digital investigation work." Morrow smiled. "Agent Wells mentioned that. Said you'd make a good forensic consultant if you ever wanted to change careers. Interesting possibility." Thursday brought the final piece of poetic justice. TechFlow Solutions, facing federal investigation and massive legal liability, declared bankruptcy. All employees were terminated immediately, including Derek, not that he was in a position to work from federal detention. Sterling Design, meanwhile, issued a press release announcing new security protocols and a partnership with my IT consulting firm to conduct comprehensive digital security audits for all client accounts. My phone had been ringing non-stop with new business inquiries. Apparently, being the guy who exposed corporate espionage was excellent marketing for cybersecurity services. Friday evening, Ben and I sat at Murphy's Pub, watching the local news coverage of Derek's federal hearing. The judge had denied bail, citing flight risk and the serious nature of the charges. "Think he'll take a plea deal?" Ben asked. "Probably. The evidence is too strong to fight, and federal prosecutors don't like losing cases." "What about Vivian?" "She'll cooperate, testify against Derek, and probably get probation with community service. Her lawyers are good. You okay with that?" I considered the question while watching Derek's attorney argue unsuccessfully for bail reduction. Derek was the predator in this situation. He targeted my wife specifically because of her access to proprietary information. Vivian was guilty of terrible judgment and betrayal, but Derek orchestrated the whole scheme. Very philosophical of you. I want justice, not revenge. Derek's getting justice. Federal prison, destroyed career, complete social disgrace. Vivian's getting consequences appropriate to her level of culpability. And you're getting a fresh start. Exactly. Clean slate, successful business, and the satisfaction of knowing I handled this situation with intelligence instead of emotion. The news switched to weather, and we turned our attention to more pleasant topics. But as I drove home that night, I reflected on how completely the tables had turned. 2 weeks ago, I'd been the betrayed husband, watching helplessly as my wife and her lover destroyed my marriage. Tonight, Derek was in federal detention facing years in prison. Vivian was unemployed and facing potential criminal charges, and I was fielding job offers from companies impressed by my investigative skills. Sometimes the good guys actually do win. The divorce papers were already filed, the federal investigation was proceeding smoothly, and my new life was beginning. Not the ending I'd planned when I married Vivian, but definitely the ending she and Derek had earned through their choices. Justice served, mission accomplished, and a future full of possibilities ahead. Some stories end with redemption and forgiveness. This one ended with consequences and new beginnings. I was perfectly satisfied with that outcome.